So this is session 5, bottom of page 20. And we studied last week how Bill did the work. How did he do the work? In the hospital. Did he mess around? No, he didn't mess around at all. So he was still, and you can read other books. I don't think I said this last week, but he was going through the DTs, and Bill had the DTs, I mean, bad. So he couldn't even hold a pencil. And I think it's Pass It On or Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Ebby had to actually do the writing for him because Bill couldn't hold a pencil. But that was his willingness to get the 4th step done with Ebby. Ebby was doing the writing and he was voicing it out in the hospital. So that tells you where his willingness was as one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. But now we're going to describe different kinds of drinkers and what makes the alcoholic different than these type of drinkers. So moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely, again, bottom of page 20, if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. One of my best friends was like that. He would drink a handle with me every single day. Anywhere I went, we'd drink and drive every day. We'd get into trouble together. He got a DUI. He was done. He hasn't drank since. That was enough. Difference is I got a DUI. I was drinking the day I got out of jail. So, I mean, there can be heavy drinkers that, may, drink high quantities, but something can happen to them in life, like it says, whether it be ill health or a DUI or something, big happens in their life to get them in trouble. They can just stop. Alcoholic can't. Let's read what the real alcoholic is. So I would highlight this whole next paragraph. So we know what a moderate drinker was. Moderate drinker is, we'll never understand that person. They have a sip of wine and not even pay attention to it and leave, or half a beer, and we're looking at them like, what is that? Well, the thing is, they don't even pay attention to it. It doesn't occur to them. Some people might say, oh, I'm getting a little buzz, I got to stop. Or they're just drinking and, they don't have that allergy at all. They don't have to have another drink after the alcohol enters their system. So again, that phenomenon of craving is what differentiates the real alcoholic from the rest.
Those people, when they left the bar and left their drinks, they went into a cup for me for last call.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
I used to think, hopefully.
Drink theirs.
What if it's got something in it? I'm like, I'm hoping. I didn't even see a problem with it.
No. I understand. All right, but what of the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. So that's the key. So I wrote out phenomenon of craving right next to once he starts to drink. Because again, it's the first drink.
I have that first drink. You know how, like, when the horse races go off, that's what I hear in my head.
Yeah. It's amazing. It becomes your primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
So even for the heavy drinker, it's not they may drink a lot and in high quantities, but it's not necessarily their prime focus of drink after drink after drink after drink like us. They can stop at certain times. The real alcoholic, I mean, in my experience, I didn't stop until I was passed out, and then I woke up and I had to have more. Right. So the only way I would stop on my own is if I was passed out or if I was locked up. That was it. That's the only way I'd stop on my own. This next paragraph, you can just bracket the whole thing because they're really going to describe the real alcoholic. And if you ever hear anybody in an AA meeting say, I'm so-and-so and I'm a real alcoholic, it's a good thing. They've read the book. I know people that introduce themselves as a real alcoholic. So here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. Do we have that definition down yet? What's insanity?
Actual definition or the regular definition? So.
I want to see the first person who has it memorized, because I'm going to ask that question throughout the workshop. And it's not doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
Serious, debilitating mental disorder.
Kyle's got it. Exhibiting a serious, debilitating mental disorder. So if you don't have that definition, anytime you see the word insane, write it there if you don't have it. Exhibiting a serious, debilitating mental disorder. Something I don't like to say out loud, something you don't like to hear, but you got to come to grips that it's the only thing that explains why I continue to drink. That mental disorder is a mind not in reality, like Silkworth describes. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. Ever get hammered with 100 people and you feel like you're the only person in the room? I had to drink before going to a bar. I had to drink before going to any big event, you know. And after. Yep. So anti-socialism is a big part of this disease. Why? We're going to read, because self is a big part of this disease. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly, highlight this, dishonest and selfish. Huge part of this disease is dishonesty and selfishness. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early the next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe.
I still find him.
I mean, that was my
I
life.
did over the weekend.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoops. It was
Yep.
in the sweater pile.
Wow, over the weekend?
And luckily the wife.
And you're a year.
She was standing in, and I pulled out a sweater and went, ooh, and it fell on the floor. I said, oh, take care of it.
Every day was hiding. That was the entire obsession. And then by the time I actually started drinking, I'd pass out and then I'd start all over the next day. The hiding became like the entire focus. Ugh.
When I started reading the book, this part right there was the main part for me, where it starts how he may be one of the finest fellows in the world. That described me to the T. I always start something and mess it up because it's drinking. Always have a good career or something and mess it up.
Pull it
real
down.
fast.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
I remember a while ago I did this as a topic, and Trish brought up that like it was like flipped. Like I was the drunk constantly all the time. Like that was Dr. Jekyll. Mr. Hyde was the sober guy because of like living in that 24/7.
Yep.
But so the whole time I was still just dishonest and selfish. But without the drink, it was like I would amount to things. And yeah.
And that's awesome that you said that, because that's when the anger and fear really comes out, is when we're not drinking. That's why we drink. So I can definitely see, the Mr. Hyde part. Yeah. All right. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who can give him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. I tried to become a drug addict. If I could just put this alcohol away and just do drugs, but no matter what I tried, I was drinking. So everybody will have their drug of choice. Like some people do the opposite. Will try to drink as much as they can, but then get back to cocaine or whatever their main drug is. But a lot of times for us, it's a combination. It was a combination for me. And one of the biggest drug dealers I got mine from was the doctor. I did every pill there was to try to get me through the DTs. And when you try to do it that way, you're drinking on top of it.
Yeah. I have promise written next to that last sentence.
It is an absolute promise. Yep. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. Anybody when they stopped drinking, they started ending up in places like that? Yeah.
I was more of an upward person if I was drinking. I need some cocaine. I didn't like popping pills. So I like to be like the life of the party, not sitting there like this.
Right.
So it was like different for me. But then I can't do cocaine if I'm not drinking because it gives me bad anxiety.
But you understand the combination. You had to have a combination of something. I did too. Yeah.
My first shot, I'm calling. If I didn't already have it, I'm calling to get some.
Yeah. Yep. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all of its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. And again, what did Dr. Silkworth call the allergy? The phenomenon of craving. What's a phenomenon? An observable fact that cannot be explained. So it's saying here we may not have a full answer, but Dr. Silkworth is telling us we may not be able to explain it, but we see exactly what happens when the alcoholic takes a drink. They can't stop. Or the drug addict, they can't stop. So that phenomenon ties right into this. It's an observable fact or extraordinary event. You either have alcoholism or you don't. There is no gray area. None. You have that allergy or you don't. And the only person that needs to know that you have it is you. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. But again, we can. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. I have this rest of this page highlighted. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, here's that switch. Something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. This is what every alcoholic has to understand. Like I said, you can describe it the way you want. I just describe it as a switch. All my excuses, my promises, this is how it's going to be different. Soon as I take that drink, that switch goes off, everything is out the window. And my only focus is that next drink or drug. That's it.
Do you think that people have like more of a mental than a physical craving for it?
Yeah, the mental is definitely the main part. The book calls it the crux of the problem. It's the main part of the problem.
Because remember I was telling you, like I didn't have like DTs or stuff like that, but like as soon as I have that one drink though, it's on, you know.
Well, there's also, you were also locked up.
Yeah.
There's people that aren't locked up that when you keep progressively drinking, like if you didn't get locked up, you'd get the DTs.
I was drinking in there.
Yeah. So
Every
there you go.
coach,
Yeah, there you
moonshine,
go.
every day for like a year straight we was drinking.
Yeah. So the DTs come at different stages. I got them in my 20s. So some people don't experience them until they're in their 50s. So it depends on the person. But, I got to the point where if I was up, I was drinking.
And it
So-
really kind of depends on metabolism and how your body, your liver
Processes it,
because
yeah.
I never did. I mean, a handle was just a drink for me. That was the beginning of my drinking. You know, it didn't stop at a handle, but I never had DTs.
Most of us have a really high tolerance.
Mhm.
Most of us. It's like natural.
The nurse was pretty shocked when I had talked about them, and she was like, "You shouldn't even know what smooth brain or wet brain is."
Yeah.
I wouldn't qualify.
That shit's crazy.
Yeah.
That shit's nuts.
Well, I remember blowing into a breathalyzer when I was in the hospital talking to a doctor, and it was I averaged 0.4s. You know, my last one was like a 0.52. That should be death. But I remember I blew a 0.41 when I was talking to the doctor. I was coherent because I even still remember it now. And she just looked at me, and I remember she was like, "You should be in a coma."
That's what I got.
And
told.
it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh.
But so I mean, but that was I wasn't done drinking for like another 8-9 years. So, and you know, I see a lot of people nodding their heads. The tolerance is usually very, very high, you know, for alcoholics, especially in the beginning, especially when it's working for us, right? You know, we can have 12 and that's just getting started.
We used to say that was the one thing I for sure knew that I inherited from my dad. His tolerance. to
Tolerance,
alcohol.
yeah. But towards the end, that tolerance goes away.
Yeah.
I know.
That's what I was gonna say, I was like, the tolerance does go away.
It
and then
goes-
You have the dependency upon it.
Yep.
I know that's how it was for me anyway, is I would drink myself to a point of where drunk was sober. Like I could function normally, or so I thought was normally, like fucked up. And like you're saying about the breathalyzer, I was in the hospital and I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was a 0.495 for my blood alcohol content.
Mhm.
And they're like, you should be dead right
Yep.
now. So,
And you remember that, and you were just talking to him fine, yeah.
yeah, and I'm just like, what the hell?
But in the late stages, like the last time I drank, I remember having a Coors Light, and that's all I remember. In the late stages, your tolerance goes down to almost nothing. You know, I woke up to a bottle, you know, obviously, but I was pretty much blacked out after a drink. I had, you know, one of my friends. She ended up in a mental institution. She said she had one drink, but the liver just can't process it anymore. So you have one drink, and the alcohol just kind of, if your liver's shot, just kind of stays in your liver. So like she went out, she had a drink, she ended up locked up, and then you know she died probably next couple weeks. You know, just not having hardly anything. So your tolerance is always high, but when you get in the late stages, it drastically goes down. Yeah.
I noticed my digestion slowed way down. So I could be drinking for hours and be like, I'm not feeling anything.
Yep.
And then suddenly I was absolutely hammered.
Gone. Yeah. I've
Yep.
been there.
Has anybody read the book Under the Influence? Has anybody heard of that? Under the Influence, it's not AA, but it describes alcoholism throughout the entire stages, all, you know, from beginning all the way to the very end. I had to read it in rehab, but it's a good book to show somebody that, you know, even like a teenager, they could read that book and it would scare the hell out. I remember reading the book in rehab. I was like, man, I'm not that bad, and then I got that bad. But Under the Influence, it's a great book for someone that doesn't understand alcoholism. And it really describes how far it can get right before death, right before we talked about wet brain and, you know, the DTs. If you don't die, that's what's left is wet brain or insanity. All right, where am I?
These observations.
These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, here it is. That's what I was telling you earlier, Dimitri. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. Highlight that.
That's a problem.
That is an absolute, and they're going to get into some significant information about our mind. They already have. Hopefully from Dr. Silkworth, you got what kind of mind that we're up against. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis, right? Sometimes these excuses have certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. Havoc, definition is destruction, confusion, disorder. Destruction, confusion, disorder. I don't know about you guys, I had a lot of havoc in my life. Drinking and not drinking.
Yeah. Mainly caused from the drinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Backlash.
crazy that, like, it says a certain plausibility,
Mm-hmm.
but the havoc that comes with it does not make sense.
It doesn't. And what do? We keep going back to it. We know what it's going to do, and we're going to get into that too. Self-knowledge does nothing. We got into a little bit of self-knowledge in Bill's story, right? We know what it's going to do to us, but is that enough to keep us sober?
Because it's gonna be different this time.
Right. That's the delusion. This is how it's going to be different.
I'm gonna make this different this time.
And then you take the drink, and what happens?
Like
That question you just asked is gone completely.
Controlled drinking thing.
I love how they compare this. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. It's the same thing, right? If you draw this fallacious reasoning, misleading. If you draw this fallacious, misleading reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. What's that called?
shut down.
Johnny.
Kyle said it. I wrote denial right next to that.
And pride.
Not just a
Yep, sure. For sure it can be pride. But denial for sure. I have denial written right next to that. Laugh it off, become irritated, refuse to talk. I'm fine. Denial.
Shame.
Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is he usually has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. That's where I got. You get to the point where there's no excuse. You already used them all, And it's just,
Like, I'm just doing it.
yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yep. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, and I have these next two sentences highlighted, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are baffled a lot.
Something broken.
What's malady?
Fatal disease.
Fatal disease. And that's why I never thought AA would work for me. I thought my mind was broken. I thought there was nothing that was going to happen to change the way that I thought. God showed me otherwise. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. And that's what Trish was talking about earlier. This is how it's going to be different. And then you take the drink, then all of a sudden, that thinking switches to, uh-oh. I'm going to be down for the count.
The buckets.
How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
What'd you get for the definition for lethargy?
Sluggish or lazy. Lethargy. A lot of us have those family members that hang on. They should be gone, and they hang on. I got one. There's several people in this room that have spouses and family members that, they hang on. They want us to assert our power of will, but what is it they don't know? We don't have the power of will. We don't have willpower. Zero.
My mom used to like it's mind over matter.
My parents were the same way. Just stop. You can do it. You're strong. And then when you drink, you feel like crap because,
You let them down again.
right? I I have this highlighted. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. That's a promise. Unfortunately, I'm going to share this with you because it's the truth. Most alcoholics die. Most alcoholics do not recover. So we are miracles here tonight in this room, being sober.
Especially because, like, you know, at one point I had a lie. I was to die.
Yeah.
It wasn't for long. It lost the joy. There was no real joy because joy is the happiness was gone a long time ago, and then it was just
To fill a void.
because I do, yeah, to fill the void, and then it was because I lost control because I triggered the allergy over and over and over again. Yeah.
It's the hardest part
Finding
about
God to
recovery
help
for
fill
me.
that void.
It's watching all the people that can't do it.
Yeah, that's the hardest part in recovery, for sure. Because you know what they have, you've gone through what they've had, but you see the unwillingness, you see the dishonesty, you know. It's hard to watch.
And I used to get so mad at, like, why am I the one that left? Like, I see so many people die of this stuff, and I'm like, why am I the one that's here? You know?
And that's self-pity, but there's a reason why you are still here.
And if you compare it to nowadays with filters and stuff, that's all we do. Is we filter out everything when we look in the mirror. We filter out everything when we look at ourselves. We filter it. And taking that filter off is almost impossible for some.
Can't do it alone. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. But again, we have to have a bottom. You know, if we don't die, we're going to start at that bottom. So even though this sounds extremely tragic, we all had to have our bottom to get a start.
That's how I found out it was a mental disease over a body disease. Is because my bottom hit at 5 years sober. Didn't have the
Right.
alcohol in me. So it had to have been a mental illness. So.
Yep. All italicized words, so just bracket this whole paragraph. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower, here it is, becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. So again, this is our mind without recovery, without God, without other alcoholics. This is us on our own. You know, we end up in jail, and if we don't do anything about it, a couple weeks, couple months later, where does that consequence go in our mind when we start obsessing about drinking? Way far back, you know. The consequences don't mean much. If you're not in recovery, they're the forefront where I gotta stop now, to all of a sudden, I don't remember it being that bad.
It wasn't
Right?
that bad.
It wasn't that
my
bad.
fault.
Right.
It was their fault.
Right.
It won't happen because
That's right.
I'm not,
The
they're
blame
not around
game.
this
Yep.
time.
I was just wrong place, wrong time. I can control this. I'm at home.
Swear that the
I
blame
don't
game
have a
is
car
hard for
anymore.
But and that's the thing, without God, without people in recovery, without, you know, the program and the 12 steps, we do not have a defense against the first drink. I used to fight that for years. You know, most of us do, you know. It's my willpower. I'm stronger than this. I know I can do this. It has nothing to do with willpower because we don't have willpower. It's a disease of the mind.
All the self-knowledge doesn't help.
Nope.
And I had to learn that until I read this. This is what really like broke it down for me.
Me too.
Because
Me too.
I took so many cognitive classes when I was locked up that made me think about like why you act a certain way from when you were a kid and stuff like that, why you get angry and stuff. But I never knew why I drank, you know what I mean? Until I read this right here and understood the drinking part of it.
I mean, meetings are awesome, but I mean, the bulk, important information, a lot of times I didn't hear it, you know, I didn't. And I was paying attention. There were times that I wasn't, but then there were times where I really wanted, you know, to stop drinking. And I was listening to people, and I'd never heard a mind that's not in reality in a meeting. I didn't.
I think a lot of meetings focus around the person's story rather than the recovery.
I agree.
Actually,
I agree.
you know.
90% of meetings you're hearing someone's experience with, which is, you know, it's good. It tells us they're one of us, but we need to hear solution and what's wrong with us. You
That's
know?
what I need.
You hear the war story, but not the recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's like what you just said about being, you know, you got out of jail and you drank
Mm-hmm.
right after getting out of jail. I got a DUI, and what did I do the next morning? Picked up my car out of the impound and went, oh snap! There's three Jim Beam shooters in the storage tank in the storage compartment, and they don't go home.
Yep.
And it's
Right
like,
after a DUI.
what are you doing?
6 weeks out of treatment, the day after I got out, the night of.
But you have no,
getting out of
it's like the
treatment,
control.
Went to the bar.
But like going through a workshop like this showed me how to share in a meeting.
Right.
Because I did the same thing. I would just share what happened to me. You know, me. This mine's worse than your story. You know, that's how I shared. But it's like I don't share like that anymore. At least I try not to.
So many of those people are like, get into it, read the book. Like, why aren't we doing that right now? Isn't this an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? Like, why? Yeah.
You gotta read it.
I love this.
I think for me, reading it on my own and like studying it by myself definitely helped. And then like coming into this like made it more better. That's why I'm kind of like holding off on being a sponsor because I completed my steps, but I like want to be in depth when I give it to them. You know what I mean? Like this is how it is. This is what you need to focus on. Even though I got like my own notes in here, but this is just like amplifying it. You
Yep.
know what I mean? So I can give the person what they need and stuff.
Just as long as you're a closed mouth friend for anyone who asks.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not a sponsor, but me and Kyle sponsor each other a lot of the time. That's like,
We
Well.
need to break you two up. I get it now.
All right. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. Highlight this. There is a, what kind of failure? Complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. So again, that threadbare idea, underline that and write delusion out to the side. That's what the delusion is. Remember that simple word, idea? We hit page 30. We're going to get to it again, but idea is imagined in the mind. It's not reality. It's just something I came up with. This is how it's going to work this time.
The mind is powerful too.
Especially untreated alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
The alcoholic may say to himself, here's what we do, in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. Just if you guys just imagine that conversation we have in our own head, you know. I used to do it for hours. Try to come up with some reason to drink again, knowing I can't. I'd be sitting there for hours just trying to, you know, let my mind work in untreated alcoholism.
I love the ones who pick the fight so they can go.
Yep. How often have some of us began to drink in this nonchalant way and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? And it's not and it's not the sixth drink, right? It's the first one. It's always the first one. Because after the first one, that's where our mind goes to. Well, I'm number 6. What's the point now?
I'm not gonna relapse off of one beer.
Exactly.
Let's run the world down.
Exactly. Yep.
I was gonna say, like, that last paragraph is definitely something I can relate with, genuinely speaking, because, like, after I came into the rooms, like, I couldn't think of about drinking normally after the knowledge that I knew about my drinking. And I was like, fuck, why did I do this again?
A room full of AA will mess up your drinking for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
It was crazy.
Yeah. Because you would, even when I was in and out, I always heard something. And then when I went out to drink after AA, it was like, that's when it stopped working, really, is when I started coming into recovery. I'd hear stuff. I'd hear people that stopped and stayed stopped. And then you'd go out there and drink and be like, oh, this is miserable, All right, I have the rest of this page highlighted. These are some promises. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. What is that little nudge telling me right there?
We need God.
We need God. If I'm beyond human aid, what's left?
God.
God.
And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. There's the other options. I need a power greater than myself, or I'm going to get locked up or go permanently insane, or both. This is where my sponsor had me write down, back in the day, the old timers used to share this all the time, that line right there, locked up, covered up, or sobered up. That's what they called that line right there. If I'm beyond human aid, locked up, die, or go permanently insane. Locked up, covered up, sobered up.
This last time I felt like I was on that threshold of actual insanity, like straight psychosis.
That's a good word. Were you here for when? We're going to get back into that word when we get to page 30. Psychosis is a huge part of our disease. Huge. All right. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. You think legions is just a few? Multitudes. Multitudes. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. That's a lot of tough stuff we just read, right? All right, what's the next 4 words say? Italicized.
There's the solution.
Is a solution.
Thank God, there is a solution. And it's okay if you don't believe it now. Just hope, it's hope, because there is. If there wasn't a solution, there wouldn't be millions of meetings, What does Colorado Springs have? 360 a week. There is a solution.
We started with one man who died at 5 years sober, and he had the most sobriety in the town at that time.
Wow.
Apparently the highest in Colorado Springs is like 62 years. Allegedly. I heard that the other night.
Has alcohol?
I think Sweet had 60.
There were-
My sponsors passed away at 63
Yeah.
63 years.
There was a guy who was chairing at Walk the Talk. He was in a meeting with Bill Wilson. He's got 56 years, but he's like, I wish I'd have known the significance.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yep.
Just-
All right. Almost none of us, and none of us do, liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, and I would highlight all this, which the process requires for its successful consummation. Consummation means to finish or complete. And are we ever fully finished or completed?
Never.
But these things, and they're just giving us a few of them, this is what the process requires. And don't let it affect you from keeping you out of the rooms. A lot of people, they look at those steps, they're on step 1, and they look at step 9, or they look at step 4, or they look at step 5, and, it drives them out of the rooms. I'm not going to do that. Don't look at those, that's why step 1 is 43 pages. Okay. But we saw that it really worked in others. I have that highlighted. That's where meetings help. Even if you don't believe it, you see that it works in others. And we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom, I have that highlighted, whose problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. I have this highlighted. This is an awesome promise. We have found much heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we haven't even dreamed. That is a promise. And I have this whole next paragraph highlighted, and you can label this the first step promises. You read the 9-step promises, in meetings, you hear those in meetings, but there's promises associated with every single step. There's over 220 just regular promises, but there's also some that are designed for that particular step. Label this paragraph the first step promises.
I like the third step.
I love the third step ones because I never believed them, and they all came true. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Now, most of us would keep reading, right? You see the asterisk there, right? What does that mean? Who cares? So connect that asterisk to the one at the bottom of the page. And what does it say?
Fully explained.
Fully explained Appendix 2. Even when I was shown that, I was like, who cares? What should I do? I should go to Appendix 2. You can write page 567 right next to that.
569 for us.
For us. 567, if you have the new improved book, 569.
I don't even have that. That's when they were half my book.
Uh-oh.
Should've got the real book.
Well, that means
There's no way. This has to have it.
that has to have spiritual
Well, yeah,
experience.
it's probably the last. Because mine skips like 300 or so. I was gonna say it has to.
No.
Keep
There
going.
we go. 183 for you.
We'll
Yeah,
have a
mine,
talk
mine
See,
goes
you
from
got
like
it.
164 to 269. It skips the rest.
So it's actually, see, I'm over here, I think I wrote a 5, but I'm hoping I didn't write.
I was wondering,
Ah, I
I was
did write a
like, we
five.
don't have this
One
one
did.
here.
Is everybody there? Okay. So this is spiritual experience. This helps the agnostic who doesn't know who God is. This spiritual experience can help a lot of people that are atheists or agnostics. And I'm going to show you how many times they use the word change or describes the word change. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows, I have the rest of this highlighted, the personality change. There's the first change. And I have mine numbered. If you want to number them, you can. I wrote a number 1 right above that change. Because what do we got to change?
Everything.
Yeah, you're going to realize that. Yep. So the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, there's the second one, or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheaval. The definition of upheaval is a sensational change. So that's the third one. A sensational change is an upheaval. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous, right? Incorrect, right next to that. So what is? How did Bill Wilson have his spiritual experience? How did he come to Christ? It was boom, bam, obsession removed. Does that happen to most alcoholics? That's why this is so important to newcomers. A lot of people that read this book when it first came out, They read how Bill Wilson had his sudden spiritual awakening, that it was completely removed. So they thought they should have that same kind of spiritual experience. For most of us, they didn't. With Dr. Bob, he suffered for 2 years. We'll read that. So just because you stop drinking, but you're still mentally suffering, that's okay. That's normal. I suffered for several months. I had DTs for a long time, several weeks. So just know that, what Bill went through isn't what most of us go through. In order for AA to get started, I think God had to make it that way. So the first alcoholic had to have a sudden spiritual experience, especially one like Bill. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described, and we read another one. Bill Dotson had the same thing, alcoholic number 3. Though it was not our intention, that was the 4th one. So revolutionary change, that's the 4th one. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded, we like to nevertheless conclude, don't we? That in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness. That's the 5th change, overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. There's the 6th one. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, that's the 7th one, change, transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. So here's the good news. I have this highlighted. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Now, it's my experience, not my opinion, that the faster you get into the work and do the work, the faster that obsession being removed happens. Mine was in 3 months when I was doing my first workshop.
I agree.
It was in step 3. It was my first time. I was forced to help somebody. It's like, I can't help anybody. It's like, do you have the first 43 pages highlighted? I do. We'll take him through the first 43 pages. So I started helping him, and sometime during that time frame when we did step 3, I wasn't thinking about drinking anymore. And usually other people will notice before you do, but it'll hit you. One of these days you're going to be like, I didn't want to drink today, and I didn't think about drinking today. And you'll notice it, and it's going to be very, very powerful.
Do you have periodic times where it still pops, like a minimal thought pops up?
I call them the
Not
in
like
and
the-
outs.
not like the urge,
right.
though?
And the difference is, you'll get a thought of, oh, a beer sounds good, or you think about something good that drinking has done. But how long do you concentrate on that thought? When I was in untreated alcoholism, it would be all day until I drank. But in recovery, it's in and out.
It's the same. I'll see a beer, something that I've never tried. Like now they have Mountain Dew beer. I'm like,
Really?
So
sorry,
it tastes
garbage.
awful. It's so
You had one, huh?
But then I quickly think about where it was.
It's
Like,
sugar free. There's no caffeine in it. It sucks. It tastes like diet soda, and it doesn't even get you drunk.
But then what you said was important. You play it out.
Yeah.
You play it out.
I carry my 24 for a reason.
Yeah.
Same with the.
I'm 15 years, I still have my newcomer chip. Just because of that. You always want to remember the last time you drank. That's why we have sobriety dates. That's why we have a chip system. You want to remember because you don't want to forget that what it did to you.
Or others.
And I never want to forget where I came from.
Yep.
I don't ever want to forget that. But it's weird though, because like I'm still ashamed of all the stuff. Like, and,
Go
you know
back
what I
and
mean?
read why we were chosen over and over again until your shame is gone.
That's gonna be a while.
You were chosen.
And you're in a room filled with people who have been exactly where you're at. And the shame doesn't go away. I hate to tell you. We can feel shame for something we do sober. I do it all the time.
Oh yeah.
All the time. So
Manage it better, or we let it go instead of letting it dwell on our
That's it.
minds. We just accept it, and then, at least for me, I accepted it now. Before I used to dwell on this, go crazy, and I gotta drink or react, gotta go do anger or drink, one or the other. Those are my go-tos.
Yep.
Anger or drinking.
You drink, it's still there. You wake up the next morning, that problem or that anger, that
Still there.
hang up, it's still there.
That's right.
Plus whatever.
It
you
didn't
did.
go anywhere.
Yeah.
Plus
Plus what you
added to
did.
it. Yeah.
I'll multiply it by 10 every time.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, don't put a finish date on when the obsession is going to be removed. My experience is the faster you start doing the steps thoroughly, honestly,
Right.
but the faster you get into them and start doing them is the faster the obsession is removed. Most people will tell you that. And it's, I found it to be true. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. I find that to be true. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration. There's another word for change. Profound alteration. In his reaction to life, that such a change, there's the 9th one, could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, this is awesome right here, I'd highlight this, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, highlight that, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And I believe this to be true. God made all of us. That inner resource is in every man and woman. Now, we have willpower. I mean, we have a free, not willpower, we have a free will, to choose what to believe, how to believe, even though it's not true. But we have that inner resource inside of us. That's why science can't explain morals.
I had a dyslexic moment. What was 8 and 9 again?
8 and 9.
Alteration and.
Yep.
Change right after.
And right below it, yep. Profound alteration and then change right before profound. But that inner resource is important. If you believe you have it, if you don't think you have it, if you question you have it, just know it's there. And how do we tap into it? My experience was I believed in God my entire life. I had no relationship. It was nothing but repetitive prayer. And when I started helping another alcoholic, all of a sudden something was different from the inside out. And then I started seeking God, and then boy, did it, then it really went nuts.
You had purpose.
Yeah.
Fills that void.
It does. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Essence is fundamental nature or quality. Fundamental nature or quality is essence. Our more religious members call it what? God consciousness. And that is the 10th one. That is a definite change. I stay out of my own way these days. I start to rely on God. I start to rely on this God consciousness. I call him the Holy Spirit, but that's the God consciousness within. That's who leads. I used to try doing all the leading, and I failed miserably. I still try sometimes, Got to get out of the way. And he'll lead. When you let him lead, he will lead.
It's like that footsteps. You know what I'm talking
In
about?
the sand?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep.
So I thought I was alone, but it was
Nope,
always
he was
somebody
carrying
else.
you.
Yeah. I know, boy, he didn't save me.
Yep. I love that.
I was gonna say something along the lines of what I found helps me stay present with my higher power is just living presently.
In the
Not
moment.
You told me.
Not
I
judging
get it
my
every day.
past and not trying to predict the future.
Being in the moment. And it's hard to do. No matter how much time you have, it's hard to do. But it goes back to the mindset is how did they stay sober? They did it today. They did it in the moment. Even if you can't stop thinking about drinking, just put everything into today and get through the day. Some days are going to be way tougher than others too, as everybody knows. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly, I would highlight honestly, facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. I have this highlighted. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance. Intolerance means unwilling to endure. Unwilling to endure. Unwilling to endure is intolerance, or belligerent denial.
I was a belligerent drunk.
Definition of belligerent: waging war.
Cool. I was just
Waging war. So again, we're not on step 2, we're not on step 3, we're still in step 1. But if someone comes in and says, I don't want anything to do with God, you should show them these. If you're unwilling to endure, if you have an attitude of intolerance, it's going to be very hard to move forward. We find that no one need to have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. And highlight and circle all of this. Italicized words. These 3 things we have to have. Willingness, honesty, and an open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. But these are indispensable. Essentials means vital, necessary. And we've already looked up vital. Necessary to the maintenance of life, but essentials are necessary. And this is the hard part for being a closed-mouthed friend or trying to help somebody. These 3 things you have to have, but I can't give you any of them. You can't give another person any of those things. Those have to come from within that person.
I think that's where something that I've come to understand and the realization of witnessing other alcoholics going through the same thing that I'm going through, and I can always extend my hand and offer my story as help for them to heal. But if they really don't want it, I have to walk away from it. I can't chase them.
The book will tell us to do that too. It's hard to do, but it tells us it's a waste of time. I don't walk away. I'm always there, but I know when someone is not willing. Their actions tell me all I need to know. So I pray for them and pray they get back and don't die. And when they get back, I'm there for them again.
What do you think is the biggest stopper for people to be willingness, open honesty?
Well, we're dishonest people with ourselves, but the willingness is looking at those steps. Making a commitment is one of the hardest things an alcoholic can do. You have to make a commitment to go through that work of the 12 steps that you see. You got to get a closed-mouth friend that has done the work to go through it with you. There's a process that you got to go through, and we have minds that like to fast forward into the future. I don't want to do that, or whatever it may be. But that's why you have the old timers telling you need to do this, this, and this. 90 meetings in 90 days. You need to call me every day. You need to call a different alcoholic every day. Whatever it may be, it's what kept them sober.
And a lot of times it's, well, if I don't drink or drug today, then I'm gonna remember X, Y, Z, and I can't get through the day remembering that. I can't let myself focus on this, I can't. And so it's like, no, I don't wanna drink, but I don't wanna think about this. I don't wanna drink, but I don't wanna look at myself.
Yep.
The damage that we've done can literally drive us insane.
They can.
I mean, I know I have a child in prison for like his entire life because partially because of the actions of my alcoholism. But I have to remember to give him credit for his too. I can't take full blame for his actions. But as a mom, it can drive you insane if you let it. Absolutely insane.
You gotta make a commitment, and when I was at this point in the book, I still did not believe this was gonna work. I didn't, but I made myself commit to it that I'm gonna at least get through the 164 word by word. I'm gonna do this workshop and see what happens. I put it in God's hands and my entire life changed. That's where faith comes in.
There's nothing, you don't got nothing to lose by trying it 100%. Either you get it or you don't.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because if shit, we was living the other way for so long and we know how that plays out. So why not just try doing it the right way?
And that's the hard part because you see 90% of newcomers, it could be one simple thing that I don't want to do that. And it's hard because there's nothing I can say or do that's going to give them the willingness. And I understood it because I could be sitting in a meeting and make a decision. I'm not coming back. I could do that.
I had a million of those. I could make every alibi.
But if you just make that commitment to get through it, no matter what, whether you believe it or not, miracles happen.
So the concept of your higher power being the room, can that get
If that's
you
what
through?
keeps them in the room, fine.
Whatever
But
works
there
for
has,
them.
there has to be the next level to complete it, or can they get through the whole program with that? And I know it's opinion almost, but I'm trying to
Well, we'll
figure it out without my beliefs getting involved. Like,
we'll definitely touch on it when we get to
Okay.
2 and 3.
'cause I'm hearing that a lot. lately.
Well,
Yeah, I heard the weirdest thing. There was a guy that said his higher power was his sponsor, and the dude had a couple of years, but I was like,
wow.
When I first came into the rooms, back in '86 or so, there was a gentleman in the room whose higher power was the doorknob.
Mhm.
He had double digits, Do I know a whole lot about his story? I don't, because I was not there to get sober.
So there's two things there's two main reasons that happens. One of them, who's the only person you have to know in the room is an alcoholic? Yourself. It doesn't matter. I used to think just because they have 40 years, okay, he's an alcoholic. He may not necessarily be an alcoholic. It's not my place to judge or assume who that person is. I have to know I have this disease. So that's one. And two, we already read it. On the top of page 11, Bill Wilson talked about God. He used Christ. And 2 sentences down, what else did he talk about? The devil, the boss universal. He's in the rooms too. And if someone doesn't believe in God and gets 30 years of sobriety, that's perfectly fine with the devil. It's perfectly fine. So, complacency is also a really bad thing. I see people 40 years in recovery that are miserable. I mean, miserable. I don't want anything. It's not about quantity.
That's
How
like
much
that-
time they have.
That's like that lady, we saw her here once before, I can't remember her name, and I wouldn't say her name, but we saw her in that meeting, the one we went to.
Mhm.
Remember the duck lady?
Mhm.
I call her the duck lady, but anyways, 11 years, and, well, she never cooked the duck, so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, but I'm just like, it can happen to anybody, it can happen to anybody with 20 years, 30 years.
Find someone that has gone through the book that you can relate with,
Complacency.
that
so.
especially has your belief,
That helps.
it does. Help me.
Mhm.
But I had some bad sponsors too, because when I really wanted to do this, I found the first guy that was 20 years sober. He was the biggest, baddest dude in the room.
I didn't even think so.
After about a couple months being with him, he got out of AA completely. And he like, yeah, I mean, he like cursed out Bill Wilson. He said, this is a cult. It's not going to work. And he was my sponsor. So, I mean, good thing I already was with another guy, you guys know him, that got me out of that situation. But, just because someone has 20 years doesn't mean they're healthy.
Right.
We come here to recover. We come here to get healthy from an illness, and not everybody in AA, especially with years and years of time, is.
Well, that's a nice thing. The healthier you get, the more you see it in others.
Yeah.
It's really sad that we can't grant this vision to those new coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Because they hear some things and they run towards it and they're like, oh, and you're sitting back going,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought I had a good one.
Maybe you should have talked to me.
All right, there's a principle which is a bar is a block, against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail, I have that highlighted, to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. What's ignorance again?
Lack of knowledge.
There it is, all over it, lacking knowledge. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Contempt is hatred, act of despising.
I have a note down here in this book. It says, extensive research reveals that in all likelihood, Herbert Spencer never said or wrote this. This question seems to have evolved in the course of numerous attributions to an observation written by British theologian William Paley. In his 1794 work, A View of the Evidence of Christianity, Paley wrote, the infidelity of the Gentile world, and more especially of men of the rank and learning in it, is resolved into a principle which, in my judgment, will account for the inefficacy of any argument or any evidence whatever, viz. Contempt prior to examination.
So what does that mean?
Same thing.
Okay.
Wow, version.
That's cool how it has all these little notes.
I'm not going to argue with you. That could very well be true.
Well, it looks like they're just giving credit where credit is.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And I know, Herbert Spencer, he wasn't a believer. I know that.
He wasn't.
Uh-uh. But what's the point?
Who, Spencer
Can,
wrote that?
yeah.
It's a bar on 8th Street.
Can what do most, if not all, alcoholics do? That contempt prior to investigation. It starts with AA. I've heard a lot about those meetings. I'm not going to go. I hear this person. I hear this person. What am I doing? I'm not at the meeting. I'm having contempt before I even go into the meeting. I can still do it today. You want to go to this meeting in Monument? No, I've heard all these things about it. I can't go there. There's a bunch of atheists there. Have I ever been there?
Prejudging?
No. We do it all the time. So that contempt prior to investigation.
That's why I never went to your meetings, because I heard what goes on over there.
You must not have heard it.
Yeah.
Because you'd be flocking over there.
You know the funny thing is,
Yeah.
when I first moved to this town, I was on paper, so I had to get a paper sign. I hated that shit. That was the first room I ever walked into in this state.
We signed a lot of papers.
So do you know, in that meeting, I heard a really cool story. And this gentleman was sitting down at the back of the room, looked like one of the homeless gentlemen that, was around, and he shared. And he was talking about how the courts brought him in and, he had to get the paper signed for 90 days and he had to do this and he took the paper back. And this whole long story, and it came right down to, after I turned that 90-day paperwork in, he goes, for some reason, I found myself coming back. He goes, a month later, I realized that I was still coming to meetings, he goes, and not getting my paper signed. He goes, and that was 19 years ago.
Wow.
Whoa,
Wow.
that's neat.
That is
Really
cool.
cool.
Yeah. Okay, so back to 25, but was that new for anybody? It was for me when it was first pointed out to me, that asterisk. I never cared anything about an asterisk or what it meant.
Yeah, I didn't even realize the very first time I read the book, I didn't know you were supposed to do the forewords.
Me neither.
Me neither. I didn't read the doctor's opinion.
Yeah.
And one of the most important parts of the book, I went right to page 1.
Someone said chapter 1 and I was like,
Yep.
okay,
And if I saw, and the asterisk clearly says fully explained, but I would keep on reading. I wouldn't go to the appendix.
I didn't even pay that no mind. I got like my own highlighted stuff. I didn't even see this.
Yep.
No, I didn't notice this in the back of the book.
The
This-
cr-
this
Good.
stuff right
So
here.
that's the first time you read it?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna get on your sponsor for that one. All right. So back to the asterisk, page 25, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. Pretty awesome. And those are, like I said, that paragraph is the first step promises. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe, and I would highlight the rest of this, there is no middle of the road solution. We like to make one, but there is none. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid. We had two alternatives. Here they are. And there is no gray area. One was to go on to the bitter end, and you can label these 1 and 2. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And that's what most alcoholics do. And here's 2. Accept spiritual help. So we're only on 25. We still got a ways to go in step 1, but what are 2 very important components that the authors of this book are telling us? 1, we can't do it alone, and 2, we can't do it without God.
Mm-hmm.
With a theme of helping others since the beginning, right? Yet we're still in step 1, yeah. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Okay, right? Dr. Young on the top of this. I don't know if we'll get through this today. I'll give it a start though, because this is important stuff. But Dr. Young, write that on the top of this page. Jung, Dr. Young. And on the side, I want you to write Roland H. Roland H. Roland Hazard is this guy's name. The history with Roland Hazard, he was Ebby Thatcher's sponsor. Okay? Ebby's the one that showed up to Bill Wilson's house and one member of the Oxford groups and was one of the reasons Bill got sober. Roland Hazard was a member of the Oxford groups. I don't believe he did. Don't quote me on that, but I think he went back out. Yep. I have a big stack of history right here. I think he's in there. But I don't believe he stayed sober. There's rumors about Ebby, yeah. Most people think that he went back out. So, all right. A certain American businessman so this is Roland. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Okay, now Roland is a rich dude. And at this time, during the 1920s and 30s, there were 3 well-known psychiatrists. Freud, Adler, and Jung. 2 out of the 3 are atheists. Dr. Jung was not a believer, but he was spiritual. Let's put it that way. He was open to spirituality. Adler and Freud were not. I mean, they were atheists, and they would tell you why they're atheists. But he went to Jung. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. So what's it saying? Profound knowledge. He understands his mind. There's no way he can drink again.
Right.
What does the next sentence say? Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. So again, self-knowledge. Just because I know I'm an alcoholic doesn't mean I'm going to stop drinking. Just because I know that I'm going to end up dead or I have all these consequences doesn't mean I'm going to stop drinking. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to the doctor, whom he admired, and he asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. So there's his answer from Dr. Young. You're hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. So imagine that. One of the best renowned psychologists in the world. No, you're done. You're hopeless.
I don't know what to do with
You need to hire a bodyguard or you're going to die. So that was the news he got. But then it says, this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided, highlight this, he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. So right at the top of this page, I want you to write in big letters, psychic change. And I told you that we would, in the doctor's opinion, I would have you write page 27 in XXIX. So real quick, go to XXIX in the doctor's opinion. Does everybody have page 27 written next to the second paragraph? On the other hand, if you don't, write it down now.
The psychic change.
I wonder which one mine's in.
So Silkworth says, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. So back to 27, what does it say? Willing to maintain a certain simple attitude, and there's nowhere else in the big book that's going to describe the psychic change that this page describes. So Silkworth says we have to have it. And this is the page that tells us what that psychic change is. So it says, some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, and we know what that is, right? Habitual. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? So Roland's begging him, I need some help. Yes, replied to the doctor, there is. Exceptions to yours have been occurring since early times. I would bracket this whole paragraph, highlight this whole paragraph. Now he's talking about Roland's mind right here. It's very important. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. There's that word vital again. necessary to the maintenance of life. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. So Dr. Young was not a Christian, but he's using that word phenomena, which means what? Observable fact
Or even
that can't be explained, but it's true. So then he's describing what he's seen in some of his alcoholic patients. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Okay, he's talking about his mind. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, and we're going to get into what those are. The emotions, ideas, and attitudes when I'm in my alcoholism is what? It's resentment, it's fear, it's selfishness, jealousy, dishonesty, unwillingness, ignorance. That's what was running my life when I was in alcoholism. He's saying those are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And how did Bill start? What was the new idea that he had? Altruism. Dr. Silkworth talked about it. The unselfish interest in the welfare of others. So what starts taking over all those negative emotions and ideas? Altruism, willingness, honesty, open-mindedness, enduring. These positive things start taking over. And this is funny. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. So he's trying to physically give him this psychic change. How much success do you think he had? Zero.
Because it says it cannot be
That's right. That's right. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. So can I physically give someone a spiritual experience or psychic change? No. Where is it going to come from then? God.
That's why you said trying to produce.
That's right. And he couldn't. He's not an atheist, but he's not a believer. But he's still, as a doctor, he's a world-renowned psychologist. I can give this guy a psychic change. He's had zero success doing that.
You think if somebody tried to torture someone into a psychic change, it would help? When he said that, my mind went to somewhere crazy.
Definitely, I'd say definitely worse.
Your response easier for a roller coaster.
Here, take this.
Does that make sense, though? And why, I don't know about you guys, I saw a lot of therapists, I saw a lot of psychologists, and Roland is with one of the most world-renowned psychologists. And what's he telling him? You're hopeless? Or, I've seen this happen with other people, let me try to give you this spiritual experience. Can't.
Some people aren't handcuffed to their baggage. We are.
We are, yep.
That's a good way to put it.
Take them to the RV.
I like that. We good.
See this?
Don't ignore the asterisk, real quick. Don't ignore the asterisk. Bring it down, and what does it say? We won't read it again. Usually I make you guys read it again, but on the page before it said fully explained, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does it say now? For amplification. In other words, they know who they're dealing with. They know that the first time that said this alcoholic read that asterisk, we would skip it. So they bring it back again. And guess what? They're going to bring it back a third time. But just write the asterisk and put page 567 next to that. We can stop here, or I can finish this chapter. There's only a page and a half. It's up to you guys. Keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. This is funny. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. So what did I say about Roland? He came from the Oxford groups. He was Christian. Mm-hmm. Now he's hearing he needs God. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. I could relate to that as well. So this is where I came in as a believer, and when I found out that the solution was God, it kind of turned me off because I already believe. So how could he be the solution? So Roland is here. I'm a good church member. Dr. Young saying, well, it's not just about belief. So there's more to it than just believing.
I hear a lot of people say that